Opsys360.
So it's really about setting big goals and taking them one day at a time.
Vocatio is our podcast highlighting our professionals who are keen to take part in new challenges. In this podcast, we explore their career paths and added value. We also offer at the end of each episode an HR summary of their profile. Today, we are focusing on Katie, who works in business development and client relations in the venture capital sector. She also has extensive experience in the fractional sales for startups. Thank you for being there. Today, we will be able to know better Katie. And for that, we have several questions. So the first question, for each period of change in your career path, can you explain why you made the choice you did?
Yeah, it's a great question because it made me think, why did I make all these changes? I feel mostly led in my life through my personal upbringing. And a lot of that focused on a faith perspective and looking at the world through the lens of why is this happening and what is the purpose? And something I was taught many years ago is to think about kind of a divine sense of, it almost sounds childish, but thinking, what makes me mad, glad, and sad? So what are the things that really get me fired up and frustrated, right? And so I think that as I look back at my career, I think about my undergraduate and first master's degree was in biology, but I got a job working for a technology company outside of Washington, D.C. And within the first couple of months, I was tasked with a project where we had to form some relationships with business partners in China. I knew nothing about this. This was 2003, 2004. Nobody I knew had been to China. When I first had to go on a trip there, my friends were like, why do you have to go to China? I don't know. But when I got there, I loved it. Some things thrilled me and sparked my heart in a way that I would have never imagined, and some things broke my heart. And for both of those reasons, I felt like, okay, I'm going to develop a career in international business, apparently. And that's how things went. Eventually, I realized then that my biology degree wasn't going to suit my international business aspirations. So eventually, I had to go and get my MBA because I had to learn when finance asked me a question or when there were cultural challenges I didn't understand. But again, going back to like what breaks my heart, what fires me up, what frustrates me. Again, a lot of my aspirations for getting my MBA where I was frustrated at myself not being able to answer certain questions or solve certain problems, right? So that's really what changes what guides a lot of the changes in my life is listening to that inner passions that are me, that make me different from you and from you, that I feel like is, that God gave me or that make me unique. And listening to them, honoring them, and then doing everything I can to follow them. And that's really guided a very crazy career path for me.
Okay, so 2 questions about what you just said. So first question, out of curiosity, why did you choose biology at the first time?
Yeah. I grew up in a very wonderfully beautiful middle-class town in upstate New York. In terms of careers I thought you could have, you could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, you could be an accountant, you could work at Kodak, which was a big company in Rochester, New York at the time. And I thought, I think I want to be a biology teacher. And then as I got a little bit older, I thought, well, maybe I want to be a doctor. That sounds like too much school. No, I'll be something in between a nurse and a doctor. Et voila.
Okay, thank you. And second question, you said that you were from USA. Yes. You moved to China. And now you are in Switzerland. Why did you choose to come to Switzerland?
I didn't live in China. That was not really possible at the time. I would go for a month or several weeks at a time. And we ran a business with partners there for about 6 years in my early career. I went back and taught English. I felt like I really became a student of that culture. And really just the idea that, oh my gosh, everything isn't the way I thought it was in Washington, D.C. or in New York where we lived there. It was just this idea of like, I thought the world was this way. I had a very narrow perspective. And when you begin to travel and really negotiate and collaborate with people from different cultures, you say, wow, they see the world completely different than I do. And I just find that fascinating. When I moved here, I had been doing business in Switzerland for a couple of years. I was working for an Israeli company, a really brilliant company. And I would come to Zurich and to Lausanne to service some clients and would come here. I loved the very different culture, even from having done business in Europe for several years. I love the difference between Zurich and Lausanne and just this constant student of the world. I want to learn another language. I want to learn how to logic, because with people who grew up in completely different cultural settings, who think in different languages, what changes the way you think about the world. I mean, all of this. So I could tell you the business reasons why I moved here, the personal reasons, and maybe we'll talk about that otherwise, but it's really just, I love to be a student. I love to learn. Learning includes humility, and I need a good dose of humility to learn.
Thank you. Perfect. So I will read the second question. Can you share a time when your drive for personal growth helps you achieve an ambitious goal while maintaining consistency in your approach? And how did this balance contribute to your success?
I love that you asked this question because it made me think a little bit about how to codify what I've learned over the last 20 years of my career. And I would say, if I look back at the biggest challenges, getting my executive MBA was a huge challenge. It was a goal I had for several years, and then it just almost wiped me out because it was 20 to 30 hours a week of work for 2 years while I was working full-time at a company that the norm was 60 to 70 hours a week. The fact that I lived through it is amazing. But I also have done several other things. Not long after I finished my MBA, I went through the process of getting sober. I stopped drinking. And that had been a key component of my career in sales and in international business. And I was really concerned that it had become such a problem in my personal life. And I knew I needed to stop drinking for personal reasons, but I was concerned about what that would look like professionally. How would I continue to do sales and entertain clients and build those types of relationships? Another thing, as you asked about earlier, is how did I move to another country by myself? I'm not married, I don't have any children. It's much easier to move to Switzerland if you are European, married, or a big, huge corporate brings you. I did not go any of those routes. And so how did I overcome the challenge, the immigration and the integration issues? So when I look at those three things, for example, I would say that the number one kind of coping mechanism or strategy I have for those is what I've learned by being also a distance runner, not an endurance runner. I ran my first marathon for my 30th birthday. And then even one of the things I do here in Switzerland is I love running the ultra marathons in the mountains. And it's something I learned there and then it codified when I got sober, which is 1 day at a time. How do you run a marathon? 1 mile at a time, and sometimes 1 step at a time. Sometimes I'm going to get to that next tree at a time, right? And so it's really about having the goal. I want to get my MBA, but right now I just have to pass this finance exam. I cannot hold on to the theory that I'm going to get my MBA, because if I can't get through this finance exam, it's all lost, right? I just attempted my first 100K in September in the mountains, and I picked a very hard race, very technical, very slow, and I didn't finish. But I got 80 kilometers, and that's the farthest I've ever done in the mountains. It was the first time I went overnight. It was the first time I had been on a trail for more than 24 hours. That's super slow, but each time it's like, how do I get to the next life base? And it was 20 kilometers farther than I'd ever been before, and I'm proud of it. And when I was ready to make a decision of whether I could make it the additional 20 or take the bus down and come home, I could do that, right? So it's really about setting big goals and taking them 1 day at a time.
Really impressive.
Good.
In a professional setting, how do you handle situations that require change while ensuring stability in your work environment? Can you provide an example of when this approach led to positive results?
One thing I think that people are, we say change is hard, change is scary. And I like to just use the word change in a more positive setting and call it growth. Leaving what's behind and pursuing what is new isn't as scary and doesn't sound hard as much, right? So if we look at, when I'm talking to someone about a consulting agreement or working with a startup, they say, oh, well, I'm a change manager. But really, I'm a growth consultant, which in some ways is the same. And so one thing I've learned about change is that there is a grief process that all of us must endure in order to grow. We have to leave the old and familiar behind. Grieving the loss of what was in the past and holding space for everybody who needs to humbly accept that they're not going to be as good at the new, but it's in pursuit of the higher purpose or the excitement of growth.
Can you give us an example when you have an impact for the team to go from point A to point B and that was positive?
I'm going to use an old example because it's so simple that we'll all understand it. Before COVID, I was working with a company, a real estate company. They did construction and engineering and commercial development all around a large geographical area. And they were used to, for many, many years, driving everywhere to all the meetings. The traffic was bad, parking's expensive, a lot of people would be in these meetings. And so one of the things that I thought was a no-brainer was we implement Zoom. I mean, this will save hours and hours of people's time, the money for parking. And for example, we had backhouse, we had administrative functionalities of the company that never went to the meetings, but then they never had the information of things that happened in the meetings on site. So there's a lot of mistakes that happened between these. So to me, this was a no-brainer. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to do it, except for the people in the office who were missing information. And it took months because this is the way they had always done it. I mean, this was such a clear case. The efficiency gains in this company for using web technology for meetings was 150% obvious to everyone, except for the people who had to do it, right? They griped and complained because it was such a big change for them. And just realizing as I do it, this change management, right? I really have to reframe it as growth. I really have to explain the efficiency gains. I really have to explain why this is going to differentiate this company from their competitors. I really have to be very patient with guys who do not want to do this. I really have to sit with them on their meetings and run Zoom for them so they don't feel silly for the technical challenges they might have. You know, it just took a lot longer. And that's a learning I've had about being a change management consultant is to get to success, you really have to plan into all those feelings and the time it takes to get over them.
So the last question today, if someone is interested to work with you, what will you say is your added value in the professional world?
So this is, you know, having been a consultant for many years, I believe what I offer is an exceptional skill at business development and growth. So sales, marketing, the real strategy for growth is probably an area that I excel in. What differentiates me, however, in that area, because there's lots of great salespeople out there, and some people are much better. There's a lot of people who are much better at sales than I am. What differentiates me is that I actually come at it from an operational standpoint. I present as a business development, sales, and growth strategy consultant, but I do it with a passion for operations. So not just how can I be the flashiest person at the networking event that gets new clients, but rather how can I help a company design their operations so they're not reliant on a flashy sales, but really at the core, we are delivering better service, better product, better client relationships, such that it should sell itself by the time I'm done with it.
Now it's time for our assessment. We were able to identify Katie's profile thanks to a test designed and realized by Opsys360 to assess how she functions in a professional environment. Katie is highly motivated by personal growth and achievement. She sets ambitious goals for herself and enjoys working in environments that allow her to push her limits and strive for excellence. Nevertheless, this pursuit of growth does not prevent her from bringing structure, consistency, and reliability in her work. A stable environment where processes are well defined will make it easier for her to achieve the objectives. This combination of ambition and preference for stability makes her a grounded yet driven professional. Indeed, Katie is meticulous in her approach, ensuring that her high standards are met without overlooking small but important details. Katie works well as part of a team as she values a collaborative or supportive role rather than taking charge or advocating for her own ideas aggressively. This might suggest she excels in roles where she can focus on individual contributions or work within a team setting without needing to be in the spotlight. The Vocatio episode on Katie is now over, but Katie's career continues. If you've been intrigued by her profile and think she will help you grow, don't hesitate to contact us at contact@opsys360.ch.